Did you know that ADHD could be robbing you of one of the most precious resources known to man? In this video, I'm going to talk about how your sleep could be affected by ADHD, what this means to your health, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Coming up. Hi, I'm Daniel, and this is Journey to Wellness. And here on this channel, I like to bring awareness to ADHD in adulthood and what it truly looks like. If you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on one of my videos. Now let's jump into today's. It's a well-known fact that we're all supposed to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. But sometimes life doesn't permit that for any of us. However, if you have ADHD, your chances of getting the proper amount of shut-eye each night is severely diminished. Studies have shown that those of us with ADHD find it a tremendous struggle to get a proper night's rest for a multitude of different reasons. Many of us ADHDers report that we have a real hard time just making it to bed. This is where a lot of my personal sleep trouble comes from. I, like so many of us, consider myself to be a night owl. Let me know in the comment section if you live a nocturnal lifestyle, or if you follow the typical circadian rhythm. It's like we tend to come alive when the sun starts setting. I, for example, start my day about 3 or 4 in the morning, which means I'm waking up at 1 or 2 respectively. I'll work a 10-hour shift, come home and take care of all the necessary everyday life stuff, and not go back to bed till 9 or 10. Just to repeat the process all over again. Now during this 20-hour day of mine, I actually won't nap. I won't sleep, but I will experience a good deal of daytime sleepiness, somewhere between mid-morning and 1 or 2 p.m. But come late afternoon, early evening, I'm wide awake, despite my long day. Now what's interesting is a lot of nocturnal ADHDers say they tend to function better at nighttime. This can actually be our most productive time of the day, as it's usually much quieter and with far less distractions. But what often winds up happening is we'll push ourselves to the point of utter exhaustion and fall asleep, or more like pass out, in a chair or on the couch. I quite often tend to have to be rescued by my wife, who usually hears me snoring in the other room, another issue that I'll get to in a minute. It's almost like we have an aversion to the process of going to sleep. A lot of times, this could be due to how long it actually takes us to fall asleep, or the perceived amount of time. A lot of us find it really difficult to shut our brains off once our head hits the pillow. Just because our body's tired doesn't mean that we don't still have racing thoughts. Now, it takes the average person 10 to 20 minutes to actually fall asleep once their head hits the pillow. 10 to 20 minutes of constant thoughts that you have no control over and no distracting outlet for can feel a lot more like 2 hours. To add to this further, one of our most notable impairments is called time blindness. What this means is we literally cannot accurately gauge the passing of time. So the perception that it takes longer to fall asleep than it actually does also plays a big part in why we avoid going to sleep until we're ready to just pass out. Then, when we finally do climb into bed and actually do start to sleep, we are then faced with yet even more problems. Several studies have shown that there's a very strong link between ADHD and sleeping disorders. Around 3% of the general population suffers from obstructive sleep apnea, a serious condition that causes you to stop breathing several times throughout the night, causing poor oxygenation to the brain and severe sleep disruptions. This prevents you from entering your REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. Basically, it's the deep sleep state where all the healing, the regenerating, and refreshing stuff actually takes place. Over 25% of ADHDers also suffer from obstructive sleep apnea. That's an alarming figure. I happen to fall perfectly into this category. I was actually diagnosed with sleep apnea when I was about 6 years old. I was treated for it by having surgery to remove my tonsils and adenoids, a few years before I was diagnosed with ADHD for the first time. Unfortunately for me, my sleep apnea came back with a vengeance just a couple years ago. Now I have to use a special breathing apparatus called a CPAP that forces air up my nose just to keep my airway open. It sounds uncomfortable, but my God, did it make a difference. And contrary to popular belief, sleep apnea is not actually caused by being overweight. It's actually genetic, although being overweight doesn't help your case. Another sleep disorder that as many as 45% of ADHDers suffer from is RLS, or restless leg syndrome, a condition that causes you to have an extreme urge to move your legs because they just feel uncomfortable, and moving them is the only thing that relieves that discomfort. Compare this to only 2% in the general population. This can make it extremely difficult to fall asleep. It can also be linked to another condition called periodic limb movement, which can be just about as disruptive to sleep as sleep apnea. We tend to fall into one of two categories. Either we're extremely light sleepers who are disturbed by any amount of sound or light, or we sleep like the dead. I am among the majority of us, about 80% of us, who report that they sleep like the dead and have an extremely hard time resurrecting yourself in the morning. Sleeping through an earthquake? That's an understatement for me. I'm practically bomb-proof when it comes to sleep. In the morning, I don't even hear the alarm. I don't ignore it. I flat out never hear it in the first place. I am 100% reliant on my wife to hear the alarm and wake me up by literally dragging me out of the bed in the morning. And even after I'm up, I'll be on the edge of the bed, sitting there, semi-conscious, and most of the time hallucinating. And I don't mean that as an exaggeration, I mean legit hallucinations. The things that come out of my mouth in the morning are very similar to the things that you would hear on those videos of people waking up out of anesthesia. Now, as you can imagine, with sleep issues this severe, we may have a bit of a harder time functioning throughout the day, not to mention the long-term effects of severe sleep deprivation. One of the most obvious is going to be daytime sleepiness. Now, this may sound cute and harmless, but in reality, it's really quite serious. Daytime sleepiness doesn't mean that you're just going to be excessively yawning throughout the day. Imagine any time you're at rest, like when you're sitting at a desk, sitting in a meeting, taking your break, sitting at a restaurant waiting for your food, and especially while you're driving. You're going to be hit with an unshakable wave of tiredness, and trying to fight it can only be described as trying to stay awake after someone has given you an extremely strong sedative. Needless to say, your cognitive abilities are going to be severely diminished. The problems with concentration, impulsivity, and mood regulation that come along with ADHD just got exponentially worse. Now, some of the long-term effects of sleep deprivation can actually be a great risk to your health. Not getting enough good quality sleep has been directly linked to obesity. And to find out how ADHD and obesity are linked together, check out my video on how ADHD and obesity are connected right here. In particular, sleep regulates two specific hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is a hormone that tells your brain that you're full once you're eating. Ghrelin, on the other hand, tells your brain that you're hungry. Not getting enough sleep increases ghrelin and decreases leptin, causing you to eat more often and more than you should. Lack of sleep also puts you at risk for diabetes. Sleep is also responsible for repairing vital organs, such as your heart and your circulatory system. Lack of sleep can greatly contribute to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, the risk of stroke, and even heart attacks. Lack of sleep can also cause a weakened immune system, making you more susceptible to general illnesses. Now, are you ready for some good news? A lot of these sleep problems are actually very fixable. One of the best things you can do is adopt good bedtime habits, also known as sleep hygiene. These are things like using your bed for sleep only, and other bed-related activities. In other words, don't use it for watching TV, doing work, playing on your phone, etc. Speaking of not watching TV before bed, it's best to not have any screen time at least an hour before bedtime. Make sure that you get plenty of sunlight throughout your day. This helps regulate your circadian rhythm. At bedtime, make sure your room is as dark as possible. Even the smallest amount of light can be detected by your body. It's best to sleep in a cooler temperature room also. Try to create as silent of an environment as possible. Or if you prefer, Some white noise, like a fan, can help drown out distracting sounds. If you find that you can't shut your mind off at night, try journaling those thoughts as they come to you. And you want to make sure that you do this with a pen and paper. Don't just write it in your phone. Remember, no screen time right before bed. Try to have as consistent of a bedtime and waking time as possible. This helps your internal clock get adjusted and set to your schedule. Now, this is a point of contention right now. Most doctors would advise you not to take your stimulant medication any later than the mid-afternoon, as it negatively could affect your ability to go to sleep. However, some doctors have seen success with some of their patients actually taking their stimulant medication right before bedtime. Now, this may sound completely counterintuitive, but when you take in consideration what stimulant medications do for a lot of us, it actually kind of makes some sense. For a lot of ADHDers, stimulant medication actually helps calm our mind and stop the racing thoughts long enough for us to lie down and actually try to go to sleep. Now, obviously, talk to your doctor about this before you try it. Something we should be doing anyway, but make sure you get good amount of physical exercise in your day. Try not to take naps, and don't eat at least 2 hours before going to bed. Something that's really important, get a sleep study done. You surely don't want to be fighting an uphill battle with an unknown sleep disorder. Between a highly ridiculously rate of insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and others, you're actually more likely to have a sleeping disorder than not to have one. So get checked out. Some places will actually do a sleep study for free. And this particularly if you've been told or if you've noticed that you've been snoring or that you stop breathing at night. This is incredibly serious and should be addressed immediately. Besides, the treatment for sleep apnea is just about as life-changing as the first time you took ADHD medication. Now, when it comes to waking up, there are a couple of things that you can try to make it easier. There are special alarms on the market right now that actually simulate sunlight, the gradual rising of the sun, to help trigger your body's circadian rhythm and peacefully wake you up. Unfortunately, these can be a bit pricey. Another method is to set an alarm 1 hour before you actually have to be awake. This alarm is so you can take your medication. The idea is you set your medication right next to your bedstand with a glass of water. Your first alarm goes off and you get up just enough to take the medication. Then you go back to bed for an hour. By the time the second alarm goes off, your medication should already be working in your system at full force, hopefully getting you to rise out of bed a little easier. Now, there's a couple of tools that I found to help track your sleep to measure the quality of it. A couple of apps that I found are Sleep Cycle and Sleepwatch. Now, I have an iPhone, so I don't know if they're available for the other platforms, but I will have them linked in the description below. Sleep Cycle is really cool because it actually uses either your microphone to record and listen to your movement and your snoring, which it can actually play your snoring back for you if it records it. Or it can use the accelerometer built into your phone to detect movement in the bed. But it actually measures where you are in your sleep pattern at that time. And based on that information, it actually adjusts your alarm to wake you up at the most optimal time. Now, Sleepwatch, I love Sleepwatch because I don't have to do anything to set it up. All I have to do is wear my Apple Watch to bed, and it automatically tracks my sleep throughout the night. It's a great tool to see how restful your sleep actually was. I hope that you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And until next time, take care of yourself and be well.